Hello, this is What's All About with another watch review, and I apologise for the length of time in between this one and the previous one. The reason why is that I had a wrist operation. If you want to see, I've got a nice juicy scar right there on my wrist, so I've had a cast on for the last couple of months, which is obviously the reason why I haven't been able to do any watch reviews, videos anyway. So with this review, we're looking at the Audaz Gallant, or maybe Audaz, I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it. But this watch will cost you $349, or if you were to use the special code for Watched All About readers or watchers, the code is WatchItAll20. That gives you 20% off, which means it goes down to $280, which is around £190. So immediately, obviously, that knocks quite a lot off, and for under £200, it is actually quite a lot of watch for the money. So let's talk about the specs. Size wise, as you can see, this is I've got about a 7.25 inch wrist. Size wise, we're 44 millimeters in diameter, and we have a height of 13.5 mil, and then a lug to lug length of 54 mil. We have a straight strap which is 24 mil wide, so we've got 24 mil wide lugs, sapphire crystal on the top, 100 meters water resistance, a decent Seiko NH38 movement, and 2 years warranty. So you really are getting quite a lot of watch for your money. So let's have a look at it piece by piece to see to see how good it really is. So first of all, it's worth talking about the dial, I think, because this is one of the key parts of the watch. I feel is the open heart, located at 9, which I think looks really good. It's really well executed. It has a polished stainless steel surround to it, like a border, which matches the other applied elements on the dial and also the hands. So it looks good when the light hits it just right, and it's not just like a cheap and sometimes you can get quite cheap and tacky looking skeletonized elements on watches, but this is a pretty good quality. Let me just take it off. Sorry, I'm a bit slower than usual because my wrist is still recovering. So all these applied elements are nice and well applied as well, accurate, and the loom is actually surprisingly good. You probably can't really see it, but check the written review and you'll see the quality of the loom. And everything's reasonably well put together and finished as well. The only thing that I would say isn't quite up to scratch is the quality of the applied logo. It's just a little bit too thin, and we'll have a look at that under the macro lens later on. But it just doesn't feel quite as quality, or doesn't look quite as good quality as the rest of the components, because it's such thin metal, which is a shame. But apart from that, it's really good. Good dial. The design is fine as well. Can't really complain about it, and nothing out of the ordinary really. Moving on to the case. Obviously, the case is pretty big and pretty hefty. We have a nice variation of finishes as well. Predominantly brushed, but we have a polished upper edge to either side, which is a nice touch. The crown is just push-pull that has really good grip, and actually the logo is really impressively engraved on the end there, really accurate and surprisingly deep as well. So that's a really surprising level of quality there. Thinking about the bezel, if we just give it a turn, quite nice action. It does have a little bit of play in it though, but it has a nice sound to it. And this is quite relatively easy to use, and it lines up pretty nicely as well. So that's a good positive. I like the way they've designed the bezel as well, where we have the markings on a higher polished level, and then the lower in between segments it's not quite brushed, it's almost like blasted matte finish. So again, another difference in the finish there, which is quite a nice little touch. Moving on to the case back. It's a screw-in case back, and we have these various details around the mineral, I believe, exhibition window, which has a nice blue hue to it, and the Audaz logo looks like it's print screened on the underside, which is quite a nice unusual touch. So you see the movement there, and whilst we're here, might as well talk about the movement. So we've seen this movement in many micro brands before. It's good, solid, dependable movement. It's not a high beat movement, so it runs at 21.6 thousand beats per hour, which means about 6 ticks per second, if you can see it running there. But it runs pretty smoothly, to be honest. It's quite renowned as well for being quite accurate straight out of the factory. It has a 41-hour power reserve, 24 joules under the hood as well, and it has obviously automatic winding capabilities, hand winding, and a hacking second hand as well. So everything you would expect. Looks wise, it's nothing special really. It's quite industrial, but it gets the job done. And me personally, I like any movement really, as long as I can see the workings of it. So just thought worth mentioning these engravings around the exhibition window. Just like the crown, they're actually surprisingly deep, really good quality, and obviously they're filled with paint as well. Very surprising attention to detail there. So that's a couple of things that usually would be a manufacturer would skimp on them, but in this case they've done a really good job. So the leather strap is obviously 24 mil thick, 24 mil wide, so it is a decent chunky strap. It's also quite thick as well, and quite an interesting point is that it only has one keeper loop, but it is extra thick. Now I find that this is actually really handy, and I prefer it really, because you're not messing around with two, and the fact that it's extra thick means that as soon as you put it in, it keeps it in place, and I've never found it to slip off or anything like that. So in fact I've thought, oh, it would be good to see this more often, I think. Nice contrasting white or creamy white stitching as well, which looks pretty cool, matches the white on the dial. On the underside we have a couple of stamps, genuine leather, and the logo, and then we have the buckle here, which is quite an unusual shape. This is completely brushed to match most of the case as well. Audaz is very deeply engraved, as you can see from there really. The only thing is I'm not entirely too sure on the shape. I don't think it looks particularly great. I think it's probably a little bit too rounded for my liking, and a bit too short and dumpy. It works fine, but I think just a classic Prevy buckle would have looked a little bit nicer there. Okay, so that's everything covered. Let's have a look at it under a macro lens, and we'll see how it looks under closer scrutiny. Let's start with the dial then. So here's the logo. You can see the printing as well is okay. Nothing crazy though. You'll also notice we have an extremely subtle wavy pattern to the dial, and this is so subtle. Let me just give the crystal a wipe. It's literally so subtle you can barely see it to the human eye. So in many ways it's a bit pointless, but it's also nice to see when you do get up close to it. So another printing there. So let's just have a look at some of these applied elements. So these are all looking quite alright. The hands. Finishing seems alright on them as well. And then we have the open heart with this polished border around it, if I can get it in focus. And you see the open heart of the movement there. Looks quite nicely finished as well. So whilst we're thinking about the movement, I'll flip it over and we'll have a look through the case back. Probably won't be able to see a great deal, but we should be able to see the NH35A there. that's the rotor, very plain and simple. And here's the bridging, little bit of grubby finishing here and there, which is a bit of a shame to see. Let's see if we can get that out of the way, and we can see the underside of the open heart there. So that's the movement. So let's move on to the case now. We'll start with the bezel. So you can see the markings are all on a higher level, polished, and the numerals are filled with paint, which is cool. And then we have this sort of matte finish in between them as well. So then we can move on to the crown here. So that's the really refined engraving there, quite surprisingly good actually. And then the grip again is very well machined. In fact, this is probably one of the nicest crowns I've seen in quite a while. And then we have this polished top corner of the sides. So we've got brushed side, a brushed top, and then the corner, which is polished. And if we just flip it back over on the bottom, around the exhibition window, we've got the details. Again, well engraved and nicely painted as well. So quite impressive, really. Moving on to the strap. The quality of the strap, it's not amazing, I'll be honest. Probably be better off replacing it with a really nice, soft, supple handmade strap. As you can see from the top, it's just a bit flat, really. Hasn't got much character to it. I'll just show you this print on the underside, and then the side. See the side finish and the stitching. I'll show you the stitching. Here we go at the end here. So the stitching is fairly good. There you go. And then finally the buckle. So again, the Audaz is really well engraved, and the finishing is pretty good too. Okay. So let's keep in mind that currently with the Watch It All 20 code, this watch will only cost you $280 or £190. Despite its few flaws, I still think it's a really good watch. The things to remember are the quality of the applied logo could be better. You can see there. The leather strap could probably be a bit better, and so could the buckle. But really, that's the only negative things I've seen. I've noticed with wearing it. It certainly gets a lot of attention as well from others. It's a very impressive looking watch. Certainly, you have to have a wrist that is big enough to be able to hold it, I think. Because of the sheer size of it. I think you'd be struggling if you had anything smaller than my wrist. You know, if you had a 7-inch wrist and below, it certainly would probably be a bit too big for you. But saying that, it is a very well finished watch. Apart from those couple of minor points, every watch has a few minor points. I think it's really well made from a relatively unknown brand as well. I think they've done a really good job with this watch, keeping the price competitive as well. So this was the Audaz Gallant, and that's what it's all about.